manifesto, the pledge card, even, yes, the Edstone. Contracts between parties and voters used to be the foundation of British elections. Nowadays, that seem positively old-fashioned, with parties split down the middle, new ones rising from the ashes with a single word and a single cause. Has the manifesto perhaps breathed its last?
You want to splinter the current two-party system. You think you can take out the Tory party if they go for a referendum. Now, your party, the Brexit Party, has no manifesto in this election at all.
Oh, we're the only one with a clear policy platform.
Well, you don't have a manifesto.
Well, do you know, I will never, ever use the word manifesto again. Manifesto, to me, has a word association with lie, because that's what we've had, an election after election. Policy platforms, no manifestos from the Brexit Party. It's a bad, discredited word. And if you look at it, what is the Labour Party policy in this European election?
We're coming on to them shortly.
What is the Tory Party policy?
We're coming on to
I'll
them
tell you what
well.
ours is. Ours is to leave with a clean break Brexit and get on with the rest of our lives.
That was yesterday's TV. Tonight, we're joined by Polly Toynbee from The Guardian, HuffPost executive political editor Paul Waugh and LBC's Ian Dale. Interesting, wasn't it, to hear Nigel Farage saying a bad, discredited word, the manifesto. Ian, I think you possibly have the dubious honour of knowing more about manifestos than anyone would ever want to.
And that's because I edited a 3-book collection of manifestos, 1900 to 1997. There won't be a subsequent edition because I think the manifesto is dead. They're so discredited now. I mean, we could go back yonks to find promises that were made and never delivered, but people always remember the Nick Clegg thing on student fees. But you look at more recent manifestos and they're so vacuous as to be not worth the paper that they're written on. Even Margaret Thatcher's manifesto in 1979, we all think that she was a conviction politician, but actually it was a very vacuous manifesto with very few firm pledges in it.
But Polly, do you agree with that? What made them die?
No, I don't think I do agree with that. I think the idea, you know, because Farage is a one-man show and he has only one issue, he's got nothing to put in the manifesto, so he's pretending they're useless. If you look at Labour's manifesto, it's actually quite meaty. It's got a lot in it. I mean, whether people stick to them or not, they get it stuck on them, as Nick Clegg did. I mean, you pay the price. It's quite important that you stick to very specific manifesto promises, and I think it's very depressing. We're entering an age of presidential politics where all that matters is who you're voting for, not what you're voting for.
It's interesting. I mean, Nick Clegg clearly paid a price. I'm wondering if anyone has paid a price like that since.
Well, the person who did pay a price was Theresa May. Let's not forget, one of the reasons the last general election blew up for the Tories was the dementia tax in a Tory manifesto. It was a policy that overnight people suddenly thought, whoa, hold on a tick. Is this party really in tune with my values, you know, if I'm a pensioner? And suddenly that brought in this whole narrative that Theresa May wasn't invincible, and Labour then sought the opportunity. So manifestos do matter still, I think, because if you're like Farage and you say that they're associated with lies, you're saying that all political pledges are associated with lies, and that's a really dangerous place to be.
It's a really easy way out, isn't it?
This time, the Tories have just got a leaflet, a single leaflet, instead of a manifesto. They haven't got a proper manifesto. And the funny thing is what it says across the top is, we are the only ones who can deliver Brexit. You think, hello, where have we been for the last 3 years?
The reason why manifestos are effectively going to be redundant is because we are now re-entering a period of multi-party politics where there will always have to be coalitions. And as soon as you start entering coalition talks, your manifesto just goes out the window. You look at what happens in other European countries. They're not worth the paper they're written on because you can have as many pledges as you want. But if you're going into coalition talks, you just have to jettison the majority of them.
Is it genuinely about sort of coalition talks, though, or is it much more simply that we don't really believe what people offer anymore? I mean,
people have never really believed what politicians have said and promised in a sense. You can go back to the 1700s and that's the case.
But that is worrying, isn't it? If you can't literally believe anything a politician says, yeah, we all, you know, there's lots of narrative about that, but we should all be worried if that's just where we are now, right now.
But that's the whole way journalists have operated over the years. You don't believe what a politician says, so you then expose the truth.
But that's the whole point.
It.
At least you have something to measure them against, which is what a manifesto is about. I mean, for my sins, I'm one of these schmucks who's got lots and lots of print copies of manifestos from years gone by, like you.
It's sad.
And at
Why
least
do you think you're here?
We've kept them. We've kept them precisely because sometimes parties wipe them from the internet, so they don't want you to know what the previous promises are.
We're going to bring in the columns in a second, so some interesting ones, not least from the two of you. But when you have a phrase oft repeated, like Brexit means Brexit, I mean, do you think of that now as Theresa May's attempt to say absolutely nothing or to convince people that there was something solid at the bottom?
I think she did try to say absolutely nothing, but I'm not quite clear whether she realised the nothingness of what she was saying, or that no deal, or that no deal is better than a bad deal. Did she understand what that meant? And she suddenly stood back and said, actually, no deal would be a disaster.
All politicians do this. I mean, for the many, not the few. I mean,
Forwards, not backwards.
That was a great one. That was my favourite.
Let's bring in the columns. The first one is Nigel Farage writing about that interview that you saw a clip of in The Telegraph. Andrew Marr's obsession with my past, this Nigel Farage, betrays the bias at the heart of the BBC. And this is his quote: "I genuinely thought Marr wanted to learn more about what is happening now rather than focusing on positions I reportedly took a long time ago." Polly.
This really shows that Marr landed one on him, which he did, with just by presenting with positions he'd taken in the past, being in favour of a Norway solution, a whole sea of being against, being in favour of privatising the NHS, a whole series of things that were quite, that he then tried to deny. And I think it really hurt him, not just because he got seriously attacked, seriously exposed, but also the Daily Mail took it up with a 2-page spread saying that he'd been exposed, and I think he was sore, and I think this is a real sore loser's article, actually. It shows he's very thin, like lots of bullies, he's very thin-skinned.
I'm not sure I really buy that. Nigel Farage hadn't been on the Andrew Marr show for 3 years. Everyone thinks he's constantly on every BBC programme. He hasn't been on any major programme apart from Question Time last week and Andrew Marr since this election campaign started. And I think his grievance is that his party is polling so high and is more or less being ignored by a lot of BBC programmes. So I understand his frustration.
That is, to be fair, his choice quite often. I mean, it's his choice whether he comes on or not, and he says no to
he has to be invited to be able to say yes or no, doesn't he? But I also think that if you're going to interview somebody in the middle of what Andrew Marr himself admitted was an amazing campaign where the polls are showing sort of the major parties going down, you have to surely ask about that rather than just ask about quotes that he's given in the past, several of which he was right when he sort of denied the meaning that Andrew Marr was.
If he has no manifesto, all you've got to go on is what he said in the past.
It's quite simple. Leave the EU without a deal. What more do you need to know?
We're going to bring in Polly's own piece now, The Guardian. Jeremy Corbyn has to get off the fence for Labour to see off the Faragists. Never mind individual party tallies. All that matters is the number of pro-Remain, anti-Brexit votes, and that hangs on which side Labour's vote is counted.
Labour's just scored 16% in the latest poll. It is hemorrhaging votes of Remainers. And some Leavers, but they'd already really gone. I mean, they've gone long ago. If they want to save their neck in this election, they're going to have to come out as being a Remain and a second referendum party. And unless Jeremy Corbyn can pivot that way, when these talks with the Tories break down, that's his opportunity to say, right, that's who we are.
Is this a fence problem, or is it the wrong side of the fence problem?
I think it's a definition problem. I mean, we just talked about Nigel Farage. He's got fantastic definition, political definition. People know great clarity what he stands for. And the Labour Party, unfortunately, in its election literature for the Euro elections is far from clear. You need a microscope to see the phrase option for a public vote. So many MPs tonight at the PLP meeting were furious about the fact that there is no clarity. Jeremy Corbyn said, look, I hear you, I get it, I've seen these leaflets myself. Whether or not that materialises into a change of message, we've yet to see.
The last piece is Paul Wars for the HuffPost. Theresa May's Plan B Brexit compromise set to be rejected by Labour as talks falter. A shadow minister said it was fanciful to suggest that Labour would agree to be bound by any process that could in turn be torn up by a new no-deal Tory leader like Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab. We knew 6 weeks ago these talks were going to yield nothing.
Of course we did. They won't come to anything. This indicative vote thing is not going to come to anything. I mean, we have been there before.
Well, it's not indicative anymore, is it?
No, it
it's
isn't.
Definite.
So what do you do now? Well, you either get rid of Theresa May if you're the Tory parliamentary party, or if you're Theresa May, you think, OK, well, let's bring back the withdrawal agreement, make it a confidence vote, and I challenge the ERG to vote against it and cause a general election, because that would be the outcome. That's the only card she's got left, but she's not even strong enough to play that.
No. So if we had the whiteboard up now, perish the thought.
Oh, my goodness.
What would be your Your expectation, Polly, for the next...
I've given up. Expectations, crystal balls, or all the rest of it. It's
That's what
impossible
we're here for, Polly.
to get it wrong.
I wouldn't rule out us still being here in October. I really wouldn't. I mean, I know it sounds impossible, but Theresa May has found a series of stratagems to get by every week. That's the only strategy she's got.
Do you
surviving
really think
week
she
by
could
week.
survive a vote in 2 weeks' time of under 10%? Do you really think Tory MPs
Yes.
are going to put up with that?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
When you look at the alternatives,
Because a
they're
lot
not
of
so
Tory
good.
MPs are
Well, we had
worried about Boris
Crispin Blunt
Johnson.
was talking about the possibility of a Brexit party, Conservative Party coalition or arrangement of sorts.
I think
on
they'll
what
have a-
planet? I mean, how does that come about?
We shall ask him. Thank you all very much indeed. That's all we have time for this evening. I'll be back tomorrow. Do join us then. Good night. Bye-bye.